Good morning, girls. In the last class, we learned the meaning of Vedas and Vedic, and we also discussed about the Vedic literature, the four classifications of the Vedic literature, and they were the four Vedas, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. Today, we'll be talking about the political organization and society during the early Vedic age. Now, we had learnt in the first class that the period between 1500 BCE and 1000 BCE was known as the early Vedic period, and it was during this period that the Aryans they settled in the region of the Sapta Sindhu. So that period is known as the early Vedic age. So we'll discuss about the political organization. During the early Vedic period, the smallest unit of administration was the family. So during this period, during the early Vedic age, the smallest unit of management was the family. So administration it began with the family. Several families lived in a village, and a number of villages formed a jana or a tribe. So many families they formed a village, and a number of these villages would form a jana or a tribe. So the smallest unit was the family. The head of the tribe was called the Rajan. So in a tribe where there were many villages, there was one head who was called the Rajan. He was often elected by the people, and this head, that is a Rajan, he was elected by the people. He was a people's representative. His main duty was to protect his jana from external attacks and to maintain law and order. So the main duty of the Rajan, of the head of the tribe, was to protect his people, was to protect his tribe from any attack, from any external attack, any attack that came outside the tribe, and to make sure that the people accepted and obeyed all the laws and rules. He received Bali voluntary donation for his service. So the head of the tribe, that is a Rajan, he used to receive a voluntary donation, that is a donation which was received without being asked. The Rajan would not ask for it, but he received it as a voluntary donation, and it was known as a Bali. So he received this voluntary donation for his service as a Rajan. The Rajan was helped by officers like the Gramini, the Purohita, and the Senani. So to help the Rajan in managing, in administering the tribe, in administering the jana, he had helpers like the Gramini, the Purohita, and the Senani. The Gramini was the village headman who looked after the administration of the village. So the Gramini, he was the head of the village, and this Gramini looked after the management, looked after the village. The Senani was the commander of the army, and then we have the Senani who was the head of the army. Purohita was the head priest. So these three officers, that is a Gramini who was the head of the village, the Senani who was the head of the army, and Purohita who was the head priest, helped Rajan in the administration of the tribe. To advise the king and to keep a check on his powers, popular assemblies were formed. So in order to advise, in order to give advices to the king, and in order to check on his powers, in order to keep a check on his powers, there used to be popular assemblies. That is, there used to be some gatherings where they used to discuss about issues. They used to discuss about issues which were important to the villagers. Which were these assemblies? We'll discuss about the popular assemblies. The Sabha was the council of elders that performed advisory and judicial functions. So the first assembly was the Sabha. This Sabha, it was a committee of elders, and these elders, they performed advisory and judicial functions. Advisory functions, they used to study, the elders of this committee, they used to study on all the matters, and they used to make recommendations. They used to keep forward recommendations or advices, and they used to make laws. They used to formulate laws during these assemblies. So that was the function of the Sabha. Then we have the Samati. The Samati was an assembly of the people called on special occasions for consultation. So the Samati, it was an assembly where the people where they were called on special occasions. Only on special occasions the Samati assembly was called, and it was for discussion. These assemblies, the Samati assembly, it was called on special occasions for discussions. The Vidhata was the earliest assembly. So the last one, that is a Vidhata, it was the earliest assembly. It was the first assembly. It was the assembly of all the people. Even women participated in its deliberations. So in the Vidhata, all the people, all the villages, all the people of the tribe, they could be a part of this Vidhata. Even women could participate in their discussions. So these are the three popular assemblies: the Sabha, the Samiti, and the Vidhata. So this is about the political organization during the early Vedic age. Now we'll move on to the social life. Social life. Family. In the early Vedic age, the Aryans lived in villages. So during the early Vedic period, the Aryans, they lived in villages. Many families used to form a village, and hence they lived in villages. The family was a fundamental unit of the society. So we discussed before that many families formed the village. So the family was the basic unit. Fundamental unit means it was a basic unit of the society. It was patriarchal. Patriarchal, it was a system. It is a system where everything is controlled by men. So the families, they were patriarchal. They followed the patriarchal system. This means that the oldest male member was the head of the family. So the families, they followed the patriarchal system, which means that the oldest male member, the eldest male member, was the head of the family. He was called Grihapati or Kulapati, and this oldest male member who was the head of the family was known as the Grihapati or the Kulapati. So this is about family during the early Vedic period. Now we move on to the position of women. In the early Vedic society, women had equal rights as men. So during the early Vedic period, in the society, women and men enjoyed equal rights. Education was open for both boys and girls. So both boys and girls, they had the access to education. Women attended the tribal assembly, participated in debates and religious ceremonies. So like we discussed, women and men, both men and women, they had equal rights, and women could attend tribal assembly and they could participate in discussions and religious practices, religious ceremonies. The daughters were allowed to choose their husbands in a special ceremony called the Swayamvara. So during the time of the early Vedic period, there was a ceremony which was known as a Swayamvara, and in this ceremony the daughters, they were allowed to choose their husbands. Widows were allowed to remarry, and the practice of child marriage, Parda system or Sati, were not in existence. So during the early Vedic period, widows, they were allowed to remarry. Widows means those who have lost their husbands. So these widows, they were allowed to remarry, and the practice of child marriage, Parda system and Sati, were not in existence. These systems, the child marriage, where the child were given in marriage, Then the parda system. Parda system is a practice where women had to cover their face with either with a veil or with a sari. So parda system. And the sati system. The sati system was a practice which existed long back, where when a wife when the husband dies, the wife has to kill herself along with the husband, along by jumping into the fire. So these systems, the practice of child marriage, parda system and sati, did not exist during the early Vedic period. So this is about the social life, about the family and position of women during the early Vedic period. So today we learnt about the political organization of the Aryans during the early Vedic period, and also about the family and position of women during the early Vedic period. So we'll stop for today, girls. Thank you.